Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Post-Military Podcast. This episode's guest is someone I am incredibly excited to have had on the show. Jon Sepp is a bison rancher in Montana and runs the Roam Free Ranch with his wife Brittany. There he provides bison meat and pre-made food to stores like Costco nationwide. Before his time as a rancher, Jon worked in a test parachute squadron at Edwards Air Force Base, jumping experimental skydiving equipment for the United States Air Force and other branches of the military. Today we'll be discussing his transition out of the service, the unique aspects of life on a bison ranch, and how to better weather the storms of life that you might encounter. Two notes before we transition into the preview clip. One, I've included comprehensive timestamps in the show notes. Each section is labeled as advice, opinions, or background on Jon's life. If you are interested in a specific aspect that might have brought you here, feel free to navigate to those in the show notes. Finally, if you have not subscribed or followed the show on your favorite platform, I would ask that you consider following us or subscribing now. It really helps out the channel and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the episode. For the folks that are working on the ranch, like who are you finding to like live the cowboy life with you?
I found everything over the years. You know, at first it was take what you could get. I had everything from prisoners to PhDs, and over time, just of having hundreds, at least a couple hundred people come through the ranch, have really boiled it down to like what's going to make a long-term hand, which is ability to learn, humility, and mental fortitude to make it through, like a real desire to make it through difficult circumstances. So all of our hands except for one are all veterans now, Marines and Air Force guys. I've had Army there too, but mostly Marines and Air Force guys right now is what I have. So we hire, it doesn't have to be direct out of the service, but it can be any walk of life that we hire guys out of that. And I find they speak the same language. They're going to come with a certain level of like, metered governmental checks to, assess to make sure that they're not like, that they're going to be at a certain level. So you're already starting there in your sourcing, right? Which the component of it is the hardest. And then you really get into that, what the highest end of that I can find. And that's what we target through all sorts of ways. And they make great long-term employees. So they're the best to work with. I speak that language. And so we understand each other. And ranching is not a corporate job, right? When things need to happen, regardless, 7 days a week, you need people that are going to be up and willing to take that adventure on. And it's hard to find that in young people today that even fresh out of college, you simply will not find it. There's an incredible amount of entitlement, lack of a desire to work, an assumption that you should be, a king after the first day. And I don't think that's new. I think that's always been a problem, but it's now more than ever, with technology and agriculture being at such opposite ends of the spectrum, you're far away from finding young people that want to do that and even if they do, are worth your time, because most of them have zero skills that they come with. And that's a hard spot too. You need somebody that's got some skills somewhere.
Solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Post-Military Podcast, the podcast where we provide you with holistic advice to transition from one chapter of your life to another. Today, my guest, Jon, is here with me. Jon, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm super excited about it. Don't want to give away too much about your backstory, but Jon is living the Yellowstone lifestyle out in Montana, and we got to hang out recently, and it was an amazing time. So thanks so much for having me on the ranch. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no problem.
So let's just dive right into it. Tell us what you did in the military.
Yeah, so I graduated the Air Force Academy in 2009. My dad was in the military. He retired as an 2006 and did a full career. And commissioned thereafter as a second lieutenant. I studied systems engineering at the academy, and I was not qualified to be a pilot. I was color deficient, which is interesting because my career later ended up I was involved as a test parachutist at the end of my career, which the only two colors you really need to see are red and green, which are the only ones I was deficient in, which was so funny. But I initially, upon graduation, and I can't even remember what ALO was available for, whatever that career field is, whatever that AFSC is, to become an ALO was available for the first time that we graduated. That was a new career field. And I had applied. I had initially been accepted. And then through a whole series of events, ended up getting hurt over 60 days. I actually broke my legs base jumping on my own on like the first or second day of 60 days. And
where were you base jumping when you broke both of your legs?
In Colorado Springs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Where?
Actually up close to the academy. There's some cliffs up back towards the Mount Herman area back up in there.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, I was actually planned 60 days of basically a big base jumping tour where I was going to travel around and jump off, everything I could find. Some of it legal, most of it not at that time. And I was like, I'm going to get all this out before I have to, lock down the rest of my responsible adult life. Well, that ended like the first day, and it was the only time I'd ever gone alone. So, I was lucky to survive, but, terribly injured. I'd broken my legs, and, long story short, I got transitioned to another career field, which I don't even remember what they gave me. It was something like needs of the Air Force at that point, and, stayed in. I got reassigned to Edwards Air Force Base from wherever I was supposed to go. And I was there in a wheelchair for a period of time, then on crutches, as I was recovering, basically just copying and collating papers, like stapling them, doing nothing of consequence that was important whatsoever, in just like some dusty trailer there on the flight line. And I couldn't even tell you what that job was. I totally forgot about it. But this is going real deep. How did I end up testing parachutes? Because that's what I ended up doing. And commanding a SEER unit in the Air Force was, during the first few months that I was there, I happened to see a sign on base that said test parachuting, with an arrow to it. And I'm like, man, that seems like where I should be working. Let's get this life back on track. Yeah.
Did you have any fear or any kind of hesitancy to go back into skydiving or parachute testing after what had happened?
No, it was just kind of a freak accident of, an error and a packing error. And,
okay.
So yeah, I didn't really, but you're young and you think you're invincible and you're stupid. And so,
Fair enough.
At that time, no, I actually don't jump anymore now that I've had a daughter. I, have mostly cut that out, but I do plenty of other dangerous activities still. So, all that to say, I ended up going over to that shop. It was run, by a SEER, by a SEER unit there that was, only enlisted. I asked how I could work there. They're like, how did you break your legs? I was base jumping. And long story short, that led to me getting a job there. I ended up becoming the flight commander and then the commander of that unit. And, I did that, through a series of being a test engineer into with the J code and then doing a bunch of jumping and testing and working to develop new free fall equipment for the Air Force and, sister agencies and services. And just, sometimes it was writing test plans. Sometimes most of the time it was, enacting the tests, to conducting the test, making sure that everything was safe and could be fielded for use in the greater military. And I loved that job. It was, I think, the best job you can have in the Air Force. It was a super small shop, a great budget. And it really felt like what I did at that every single day, every little thing I did mattered. There was no wasted time and really fit what I was supposed to be doing. That being said, the last 8 months, I think, of my time in the Air Force, the career field manager reached out and tried to pull me away and put me into a desk job. And I was extremely uninterested in remaining in the military at that point. And so I made a very sharp diversion to getting out as fast as I could. When it was clear that, that this is going to be not a good long-term fit for me.
You didn't want to go back to punching, stapling papers in a dusty trailer on the flight line.
Exactly. Which is what they sent me back to that. And there was just no point. I think maybe I wrote a paragraph in total for like the last 8 months I was in the military of like an email. And that was the most work that I did. And it was totally worthless and just a big waste of time. So
Yeah.
I was very quick to get out.
So when you talk about testing these parachutes, does that generally involve you jumping with those chutes, or what is testing parachutes entail actually?
Yeah, so it's a long process. You get a system that needs to be fielded. You write a test plan. You develop in that what needs to be. What are the metrics that you're going to grade this system on? What is the purpose of it? Are there modifications you can make well in advance before you even start testing? Then you conduct the test, right? And so you have to meet these certain metrics for something to be fielded to the greater military. So you get requests. Most of it was either through SEER. Sometimes you do stuff like Army ODA would come over, or we had a Marine recon thing one time that they wanted us to test. Some of it was like an air deployable oxygen system that like you could use for a hey-ho jump that would turn into medical oxygen once you reach the ground, in a combat setting. Or, we would push vehicles out of airplanes, right, with parachutes on them. Or you need to jump with a dirt bike or a dog, or, you need an interchangeable harness to take, DVs on an aircraft that suddenly need to leave to switch your rigs. Those were all the types of programs that we were doing, all the way into like some ejection canopy stuff. Mostly in the free fall realm is where I worked. So yeah, we just do that. And then, yeah, there's a whole shop, a whole unit of guys. It was a SEER unit, a volunteer unit. And, it was it just fell underneath that career field. So people would have two jobs running, the regular SEER stuff that sometimes would be responsible for in terms of like regular aircrew survival training, hanging harness trainings, whatever that may be. There was a small amount of management, very small, that went into that too. But most of the bulk of the work was like writing and executing test plans with that unit. So you'd select people to, jump equipment, or, even the test equipment to make sure that the equipment was jumping. So, because sometimes we were using equipment to test that hadn't been developed yet, like data boxes and those types of things. So there'd be a lot that would go into it. And you wouldn't just put it on a person right away, of course. We'd dummy drops. You would do ground testing, you'd run pool harness testing, in the water, whatever it was, whatever the condition was that these systems were going to be used in, you'd do all that and then run it through to its final.
I don't think I'd want to stay in the Air Force after a job like that either. So
yeah,
that was sweet. Like that's like the
awesome.
coolest thing that I've ever heard of.
I skydived every day. You'd make 10 jumps a day, and you wouldn't shave or wear a uniform. We operated out of like a civilian drop zone in like Southern California. I lived on a sailboat, and it was awesome. And it was like, that's the peak. You're never going to get better than that.
No.
And so after that, it was done.
How many jumps did you leave the Air Force with?
I think I had 800 and, cause I did a lot on my own too, but it was somewhere around 840 something jumps, and then a lot of base jumps, a lot of paragliding time, a lot of like other stuff too that I did, flying a lot of paramotors, speed flying, deployable paragliders, kind of everything like airfoil parachute related.
Did you ever get into like a wingsuit type stuff as well? That's so cool.
Yeah, not super big ones, but I jumped like they're called Prodigies, were like the trainer ones. I jumped those plenty of times.
Very cool.
Was more interested in like the flying part with the canopies, or that's just what I love to do.
Gotcha. Man, you should have gotten sponsored by Red Bull and just put all of your stuff on YouTube. That would have been
yeah.
There's another version of you out there that's doing that right now.
Maybe.
So,
yeah.
That's cool. So once you realized that this job, like the Gucciest of jobs, was about to come to an end, and you knew you were getting out, what did you start to do to prepare for that transition?
I got out in a bad time. The economy was just starting to go down. It was, it was a tough time to get out. I tried everything. I thought I was going to buy a hang gliding company at one point. I negotiated with the guy on that. I thought that there was some chance to work with some other like parachute companies. I definitely could have gotten a job with a civilian parachute company doing that. But this gets into my transition of what I'm doing now, since, it's always been a childhood dream. And even while I was at the academy, just constantly thinking about my desire to have Bison. And I never thought I'd get into it in a commercial sense, that it was only going to be a hobby because I loved it so much. Since I was a little kid, I saw some with my parents how to move. They were, my dad was in the military, and 4 years old. Ever since then, I always thought I just wanted to have some. So I had saved money during my time banked my BA-8, living on the flight line, lying about living off base, and then basically took all that from 5 years and put it down on my first piece of ground that I bought in Montana. And so I got out, but needed a job. I live far away from anything now still, even. I still have no cell phone reception where I live. And the job opportunities are extremely limited. Getting into ranching is extremely cash intensive. And I came from like a, cash poor position at that point. So I transitioned to the best thing that I could, which was what will give me the most amount of cash. And at that time it was oil and gas. So I worked as a drilling foreman on drilling rigs in North Dakota, nights for a few years, where I work 2 weeks at a time and then come home 2 weeks at a time. And that was the really where I started to grow things.
So how long was it went from when you got out of the service to when you purchased your first piece of property in Montana?
Right away. I purchased my first piece during my terminal leave. Actually, a little bit before my terminal leave, I bought it. And I didn't have a solid plan for that. I didn't even know what I was doing ranching. I think I bought it in 2013, so that was 10 years ago. And I bought in a gulch. The name of the road that I live on is Wilkes Gulch. And if you've ever heard the expression, like, you dry gulch somebody, do you know what that means?
Oh, I don't. What does that mean?
It just means like you fooled them. If you're like, you dry gulch me, it's like you sold me snake oil, kind of, right? Because that's where that comes from. As a gulch, you get a dusty, dry piece of land. So I got a very dry piece of ground in Montana, but didn't have a concept for what it meant to raise and grow protein, which is, as I found out now, much more complicated than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. How did you kind of like? Your family didn't have ranching, like there wasn't a history of that in your family prior to you making this shift, was there?
No, I mean, I had my grandparents were, had done some farming, and I had family that were corn farmers, but nobody in the protein space, nobody with like ranching, running animals, which is vastly different than farming. Like you should never call, by the way, a farm, or you should never call a ranch a farm, right? That's like
is it very offensive?
It is. It's like degrading it. You're not supposed to. I don't really care, but that's a farmer sits in a tractor and tills all day long, and they weigh 300 pounds. A rancher, you're raising and moving animals and managing grass. That they're very different professions. And so I was mostly only interested just in the bison portion, but I started in beef, transition later.
I think for a lot of people, getting out of the military in and of itself is inherently a scary proposition, much less doing such an insane pivot from I test parachutes to I'm a rancher in Montana who also does oil. How do you feel like you were able to make that pivot so confidently?
I wouldn't say confidently, it was a slow step into it with a lot of things that I couldn't have planned, and I don't have like here's ABC and that happened and then we got here, right? It was planned originally to only be a hobby that I would raise bison. And so I'd work 2 weeks in the oil field nights as a roughneck. I'd come home 2 weeks and, work my way up on, doing that. And when I would come home for my 2 weeks, I would get on days, and I worked part-time on a very large beef outfit out here. And then eventually after, about a year of that, transitioned on my own piece of ground. I was busy fencing that, building it up. I ran beef on that for a time. And after about 12 months, transitioned fully to bison when I was I had an infrastructure ready to go. And that was a very small piece. I bought 240 acres to begin with. That was all I could afford. And that's on the Flathead Reservation. So I live on an Indian reservation, which land cost is much lower here. To do that. And now we've grown that considerably, but that's where it started. And so eventually I quit my side job running, as a hand on a beef ranch, and started running bison on my own. So I was doing oil field and bison, and then, man, the economy crapped out, and it was like, what do I do now? Because everybody in oil and gas lost their job overnight, especially in drilling. Once the tap gets turned off, there's no point for you to continue to put holes in the ground.
So you're working on developing your property, working on this beef ranch on the side, and you're doing oil. And so then what was it like for you learning all of those new things all at once? Because that's a significant change. So what was that whole period of your life like from just a grind perspective?
Yeah, it was really a fire hose for sure. And, I'll say the one thing I really took away from that transition was working on the outside world. You do actually a lot more work than you'd ever do in the military for pretty much any job. It's a good life being in the military in terms of your workload and your time. And I think maybe not a lot of people want to admit that, but that's what I discovered is you work, at least I do, and on the entrepreneurial side, much harder and much more outside with greater stress, but also greater reward too, right? And so that was hard to figure out where's the balance. And in that, how did I do it? I mean, it's just trial and error and trying to get through it. It was difficult, very stressful at times because you just don't know, but, just trying to consume as much knowledge as you could from everywhere. As much as I could do, every moment was reading and then trying to apply the knowledge immediately, because your timeline has shrunk, you're operating on slim budget. And, that's even harder because now you're trying to grow something without, with no money. Your oil field income pays for your living expenses. How do you grow something out of that? So it's just, you have to be extremely creative then at that point as well, which I enjoyed, eventually I ended up, and I think that's what the military prepares everybody well for is, how do you improvise, right? I think that's the lifetime of that.
It's great advice to understand that being okay with improvising, being okay with not knowing the full path and just kind of moving forward into that uncertainty regardless is an excellent life lesson that people can take from your story, because it's I think too many people get hung up on I don't know the full path, because the military is good at saying, here's your 20-year career. And then you get out and then it's all, you have to be the driver of of whatever your destiny is going to be. So
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the economy crashed and the oil dries up, how many bison, or were you still beef at that point? Were you on bison at that point?
I was on bison at that point. I don't know. Maybe it was just a hobby thing again. I was running 20 or 30. I mean, at that point, there's no economy of scale. I was just breaking even. It was just a fun thing. It was a hobby. Okay. I didn't have any big pieces of ground to be running on. I wasn't looking to try to, grow that immensely. Not at that point, not till I got laid off. Once I got laid off, then it was decision of, what do I do? Do I sell everything and go back to a desk job and just something that I didn't really felt fit my life and what I wanted to be doing? Or do I really focus, now that I have a little bit of this under my belt and some time and runway, to try to focus on that? And that was when I met my wife now, who's, she quit her job, and I for about 8 months, ran a fencing business on the side, just like building barbed fence, for ranches in that transition period. And it actually did really well. I could have been retired now had I kept on to that. And, sometimes regret that a little bit because I could have just, had lots of bison at this point, more even than we've got. But, I sold that. She quit her job. She was doing really well at Boeing. She was, next in line to be a marketing executive there at Boeing, a significant one. And she had been there quite some time. So she quit and, convinced me not to sell the ranch. We had met and, we went all in and basically found bigger leases, more animals, developed a value added product. Basically we pooled all of our money and took 8 months to build like a business plan as to like, how are we going to monetize this to make it work? And will that really work? And that was that.
Good on you for marrying someone who was a marketing executive. Like that's a perfect compliment to the business. What emotions did you kind of feel around making that final determination of like, we're basically burning the ships and this is where we're going to stay? Like, this is going to be the thing that we do.
Yeah. I felt like nothing could be worse. We're already, in a pretty bad spot here. Of course, extremely scary. You're really stepping into the unknown, a lot of stress, but also an incredible amount of motivation that can't be described to say when you're living not month to month, but day to day in a survival situation like that, you get incredibly motivated to be creative, to figure solutions out quick, to push through things and to fight for what you want. Because if you don't fight, it's not my weekend will be bad. It's no, I'll have no money and food and be in bankruptcy and lose everything. And that was truly how it was for a couple of years until we really started launching off and becoming stable. And our position obviously is much different now with our corporation that we've built, and we're, national brand, but it's a very good place to come from because that motivation didn't slow down. You're still hungry, continuing to grow at pace. And so I think it was a good start. It was a good breaking in to help us run what is still a very difficult business, which is being in ranching and food. So it's going okay.
You bring up an interesting point, which is I think it's cool that you're saying it is almost better that we started not in a hole, but like in this place of adversity. And I think that someone's military transition can also represent that place of adversity where it offers this great possible avenue for growth should you be willing to take it, which is cool. But do you have any additional thoughts on how somebody, when they're in that place of adversity, how they avoid folding? I guess is like, because I think that you're given the option where you can make the safe choice or you can do what you want, provided you don't fold. And so how do you think someone can build that resiliency?
That's a great question. I mean, like, it's hard to say because, like I said, there's no roadmap to success ever. And I would say it's 50% hard work and determination and grit, which a lot of people can find that inside themselves, but not everybody's going to be successful because the other 50% is luck, right? Things line up, or people call luck all sorts of different things, whatever you want to call it, right? Fate. Is that going to line up for you? And so I think it would be like irresponsible to just say grit and bear through it and you'll be okay. There's many things I couldn't have planned, amazing, drastic things from, we could get deep on this podcast, but I could never plan for of just massive shifts in business to enable like not being able to eat to suddenly, what are we going to do with all this? And then back to those places, and so many waves and ups and downs of that over a decade. I would say that process there's not anything that's going to help you a lot at the very beginning other than the persistence. But if you make it through that process of enough waves and ups and downs, that when we have pretty tremendous waves that come at us of we might lose everything, I can still go to bed and sleep great at night. And I sleep just as good as we're on top of the world and, we own this market. Right. So, I would say it's just been that long break-in process that's been helpful, but, some of that is things that I couldn't have planned. There's some saying about, everybody, anytime I talk about this, people always give me that, quote about, luck is,
where preparation meets opportunity, or what? Yeah,
right.
that one. Yeah,
there's some of that.
Yeah.
There's some of that. But look, if you've got a pretty solid background, I'm just also going to say, they're trying to weigh the luck portion with the other stuff equally, and it's just not. You just can't, right? The luck. There's certain pivotal moments that have to happen within that, and they have, for us so far. But again, not always. And there were a few transition periods early on where we weren't sure if we were going to make it. We got some big contracts that saved us last minute. Like, I remember we were about to call it quits. I think the first year after we were going of like, this isn't going to work. And we suddenly felt like a really big deal at that time. We got a $50,000 purchase order from some mail order subscription. And at that time, that was like, that's going to save everything. We're really going to make it now. And we worked, the whole week through Christmas, because the whole crew that we had packing, one of the products that we had, and we were making jerky at the time, they were all off for Christmas. So Brittany and I, my wife, went into the slaughterhouse, and it was just her and I, and we were killing, smoking, and packing all of our own products at night, from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. to fulfill this order, which we did in a week, which for us felt like, man, this was, totally going to make it. But that was a luck moment that order had come through, and it was just kind of, it wasn't planned for. It was a bit of a coincidence, and we scrambled to make up and make time and made it. But that moment early on could have tanked us. We were about to not make it through it, and it just barely paid our bills, for 2 more weeks till we were able to get stabilized. And then more things came on after that. We got some bigger contracts.
I think that it's very true to say that there is a lot of luck involved, but I also think that you also really do have to show up. Like, just because you got the opportunity doesn't mean that you and your wife are going to spend all of your week of Christmas
totally
like doing all that stuff. So there's definitely an extreme effort piece there too.
Yeah.
Provided the opportunity is given to you.
Yeah. I don't want to downplay that at all, but I just feel like that's the assumed part for me, is like, no matter what, I will fall on this sword every single day, all day. And you do have to have that mindset that like, you're going to go all in on this, and it's not just going to be a kind of or a maybe. And the further you get into it, the deeper you do, you have to stay there. But sometimes these humps that I'm talking about, you're not going to make it over them unless something happens, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So something that I think is really interesting that I want to ask you about before we talk about what you're doing right now is, even so in the Air Force, you knew you didn't want to do a desk job. And then you knew what you wanted to do when you got out. And it seems like you have had a really strong handle on, these are the things that make me happy or empower me in like your value set.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel like you got to the point where you were able to define those values for yourself so that you were making decisions that fell in line with the values, to where you get to the point where you, like you said, you go to bed happy every night, whether you're doing good or doing bad, because you know you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah. How do you find that? You're saying what that portion?
Yeah. Like, how did you get to the point where you understood that well enough to make the decisions that you've made?
Another great question. I don't think there's an ABC path for everybody. I'd say early on, I had it was just, the Bison thing had been since I was a little kid. Sometimes people have that. That was just it for me. I was 4 years old. I had this experience with the wild bison. I never forgot it. I always wanted them, and that kept me coming back for more. So that part, in terms of like finding meaning of what I was supposed to be doing, I always felt at some level I'm supposed to be doing that. But as I got deeper into the business, it became more fulfilling that, yes, at the surface level, looking at the bison, having them, handling them, that was great. Waking up and seeing that, being outside every day. But there was greater, deeper fulfillment in what I was doing, which I would say is still a service job, is feeding lots of people. And that has taken over almost more than just the excitement of having bison, as it's incredibly gratifying, feeling like you're providing a lot of food and good quality food for a lot of people. And so that it's just morphed and transformed over the years that I've continued to find, a desire level in there. But the initial spark was just something that I'd wanted to do from childhood, and I chased it down, right? I said, it might not last forever. I'm going to follow that. And that's the silly part of, like, when you hear people say, oh, follow your heart and your passion, which is mostly BS, right? Most of the time. That was it for me, was there is a very small part of it. Like, if you're going to choose something, what is something that you truly, at the end of the day and deeply in your core, is something you want to be doing? And for me, it was just being around bison. I like them as an animal. And it's exciting. It's much more exciting than beef ranching. And I like the exciting portion. Obviously, I did a bunch of parachute stuff and all that. I like feeling, like I have to be creative and have an exciting day every single day. And it offers me that opportunity.
I think that the thing that I'd pull from that the most is, if you have a dream, understand that you will have to dedicate significant amounts of energy to making that thing happen if you want it to actually happen, which I think is a great thing for people to hear. Random question: why is bison ranching better than beef ranching?
I don't know if it's better. I don't know. Maybe it is. Better financially if you can get it established. Bison sell for about 4 times the cost of beef. So financially, it's the best protein agriculture you can be involved in. But it takes a lot of money and difficulty to get there, and a lot of risk, right? You're just playing in that spectrum there, risk and reward. But health-wise, why is it better for somebody to eat it? You get significantly more protein. It's the highest, most nutrient-dense protein on the planet, bison is. Yeah. And so just the amount of minerals, they grow very large, yet very slow, can pack into meat. You get full, complete amino acids when you eat that meat. You could just eat bison meat for the rest of your life and be very happy and healthy. And Plains Indians did that for thousands of years before we came along, and were incredibly healthy metabolically. There's those elements to it, but just in terms of the pure job and why is it better there? For me, my least favorite portions of running beef were calving season, when you're up all night pulling calves, or just the level of sickness that cows can endure. And I felt like it was more of a job of just being a doctor and keeping them alive the whole time. And that it felt stressful and unexciting. It just was like you're a doctor with a bunch of patients that can't talk to you. And there was good elements to raising cows. I certainly enjoyed some elements of that, of the cowboy lifestyle, but I find much more of those elements in raising bison personally. Animal is very intelligent. It's a fully different animal. It's a wild animal. It's not a domesticated one. So the way you move them, you have to be around them. The excitement level is much higher. And I just think they're better to look at too. They also, ecologically, we're a keystone species with the Great Plains. And so it's meaningful too, to be a part of that process, affecting very large pieces of ground for the better, and seeing those results year over.
They're much cooler to look at than cows, for sure. Much more majestic. So you and your wife had your initial period where you launched, so you have your ranch, you get more land, you get more bison, and then what did you do? So you started selling beef jerky, and what has that expanded since then?
Yeah, after all that, we decided to go all in, leased up larger portions of ground. We got our first big lease. I think we got 10,000 acres, or 10 to 14,000, somewhere in there. And, spent years of our lives, hundreds of miles of fence put in, built a fencing company out of that, learned a lot, started changing and improving that ground, got more leases. And then, came time for, finances, getting that dialed in. We realized that having your own value added product, your own brand, is really the power. The brands that hold the power on the shelf. It's not the grocery stores, and it's not the producers, it's the brands. And at some point, for all this work, we felt like we were finally somewhat stable, but not really, really achieving. And solvency, and were disappointed in selling our animals to brands that would use our story, really didn't care, would mix that with whatever they wanted. And that's 99% of stuff you find on the shelves. And the more we got involved in food and found out, the more we felt there was a greater opportunity to have a brand that had strong integrity, was going to serve really high quality items, but at a reasonable rate, by being creative, just in the same way to start the ground. And so we started competing in the brand space and built our brand. And, we started with Bison jerky, which we had a no sugar product. And I think we're still the only 100% Bison product, shelf stable product that exists in the world, that, most people would blend it, beef in it, pork in it, whatever. And it's, the majority of it will be some domestic protein with a tiny bit of Bison so they can put it on a cover. Even burgers you eat at a restaurant, you'd be surprised to know most of it is beef and pork that goes into it. Even when you eat a Bison burger from, say, Cisco, a lot of it is mixed. And so we just wanted to be Bison specific and exclusive and serve a subset of consumers that knew that and were looking for purity, because nobody seemed to be doing that. It was just a bunch of like marketing brands owned by massive food companies that were raking in profits with pretty pictures and using our story. So we did that. And yeah, it's grown from there. We went from shelf stable to ready to eat. And now we sell nationally in lots of stores, Costco, refrigerated aisles, to, natural grocers, Sprouts, natural and organic channels, online, a variety of different grocers and retailers all across the nation.
Is Costco's Bison legit, or is it a lie?
Costco's Bison is legit. So if you buy their ground Bison, a friend of mine who we work with owns that brand there, great range. That is all Bison that goes through his plant, and he's the biggest slaughter plant that exists specifically for Bison. And so we've partnered with him many times. Yeah, I would say he's absolutely fully 100% legitimate. Excellent businessman, but interesting when you walk through his facility and see everything he's built. If you're to go to a beef brand or a brand that's owned only by a food company, say one of the major 6 food companies, their have levels are very different. And he has high integrity with how he runs his business, which is why we partnered with him. So we help each other out.
Going off of that, like, I can't imagine that large scale Bison operations, like there's very many players in the game, are there?
There's only a few major ones. So we all are, I wouldn't call it a union, but we all work together. And really with Bison, it's nice too, because you're not competing necessarily in a commodities market. It's a specialty niche. And so as much as we can grow is always as much as we can sell. There are a few bad actors that try to edge in, but that's where the military thing comes in. You just fight them off, and we blow them up now and then, and expose them, and whatever you got to do to get your space out there, on the shelf. And so that's part of food and that business.
Does the majority of Bison ranching occur in Montana, or are there other areas of the United States, or I guess other countries, where Bison is being raised?
There's probably, close to 500,000 alive now, and they're 99% privately owned as a species. They're the only species that are like that. If you were to depend on just what's in Yellowstone, what the federal government did, they would die out in one generation. There would be no more bison left. So it's actually only ranchers and commerce and capitalism that are keeping the animal alive. And, which is a very interesting model, right? It's profit driven. And you can't have like federal leases. It's also very prohibitive, right? Our federal government really tries to stop that as well. That gets into deep politics with beef and a lot of competition on leases in the greater Yellowstone region. But to answer your question, the Bison market, it's privately owned. There are a few large guys. Montana might be like the second or third largest producing state, but the largest one is New Mexico, only because of the Bermejo, I believe, with Turner Ranches. Ted Turner owns, somewhere between 1 million and 2 million acres that produces bison on. And we partner with him on certain ranches that he has certain protocols for, and buy and trade and sell animals through that network to help support our supply chains and those kinds of things. So, but there's other guys too, equally large, that are just like one-off individual private people. And yeah, we have good partnerships with them as well.
And so you said that getting federal leases for land to raise bison that's like a no-no? Like you can't.
Yeah, there's a lot of regulation to stop that, and a lot of political chatter where people talk about brucellosis, which there's never been a recorded case of a bison giving that to a cow, but people use that and that rhetoric that was developed in the 80s through the beef lobby, which is the largest lobby in the United States, to try to create laws to stop bison from growing, because it is profitable to stop you from leasing federal and state ground like BLM, that kind of stuff, which is where you can really accelerate an operation quickly. It's like people that grow corn really only grow it for the subsidy. That's what I view federal and state land ranching as. It's a bit of a subsidy. So if you can't participate in that system, you're up against a wall, and you can only lease from private or buy private. And unless you have $20 billion, you're not going to be able to buy something at a large enough size. You have to depend on long-term, I'm talking 30-year lifetime leases of running ground. And some we own, some we lease, that we run into that. And as every time we're able to buy more, we buy more and add that onto the ranch. But a lot of it leases. So like leasing through a private individual is obviously much more expensive than going through
I would imagine so. But that makes a lot more sense when you said earlier that owning bison is cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Like that. And does most of that like initial cost revolve around the difficulty in acquiring the land itself?
Yeah. Land, animals, infrastructure, all of it has to change. And then just the willpower to decide to change it and do it, take the risk, right?
Yeah.
Your herd can run away. You can get gored, stomped, trampled anytime. There's a lot that can happen to you. And so it's obviously you're taking on a lot of risk then as well.
And so y'all were not doing this by yourself. When did you start hiring on like permanent staff to help expand your operation?
I believe my first employee would have been 2017, besides me and my wife. We built miles and miles of fence, probably 40 or 50 miles of fence by ourselves, just her and I. And talk about a husband-wife bonding experience. We had some volunteers come and help us at the ranch, but we finally hired somebody in 2017, and that's grown a lot now too. We have a full bunkhouse of hands that help run the ranch, the foreman, a few different people. And then we also have employees on the food side as well that work there. And that's, we've separated the businesses to the food side as a corporation, the ranch we run, as our own LLC. So.
Okay. And for the folks that are working on the ranch, like who are you finding to like live the cowboy life with you?
I found everything over the years. At first it was take what you could get. I had everything from prisoners to PhDs, and over time, just of having hundreds, at least a couple hundred people come through the ranch, have really boiled it down to like what's going to make a long-term hand, which is ability to learn, humility, and mental fortitude to make it through, like a real desire to make it through difficult circumstances. So all of our hands except for one are all veterans now, Marines and Air Force guys. I've had Army there too. But mostly Marines and Air Force guys right now is what I have. So we hire, it doesn't have to be direct out of the service, but it can be any walk of life that we hire guys out of that. And I find they speak the same language. They're going to come with a certain level of like, metered governmental checks to, assess to make sure that they're not like, that they're going to be at a certain level. So, you're already starting there in your sourcing, right? Which the human component of it is the hardest. And then you really get into that, what the highest end of that I can find. And that's what we target through all sorts of ways. And they make great long-term employees. So they're the best to work with. I speak that language. And so we understand each other, and ranching is not a corporate job, right? When things need to happen, regardless, 7 days a week, you need people that are going to be up and willing to take that adventure on. And it's hard to find that in young people today that even fresh out of college, you simply will not find it. There's an incredible amount of entitlement, lack of a desire to work, and an assumption that you should be, a king after the first day. And I don't think that's new. I think that's always been a problem, but it's now more than ever, with technology and agriculture being at such opposite ends of the spectrum, you're far away from finding young people that want to do that and even if they do, are worth your time, because most of them have zero skills that they come with. And that's a hard spot too. You need somebody that's got some skills somewhere, right?
Say someone is listening to this podcast, which is, transitioning military, and they go, okay, I really want to do ranching. You've kind of given qualities that make a good rancher, but if you had to kind of lay out what someone should do to succeed in that space, not owning, we'll talk about ownership later, but simply working on a ranch, what do you think someone should be trying to do to succeed in that endeavor?
Like just ag specific, just a ranch if they're coming out, not any other job. I guess it would apply to any job, but I'd say at least for me, like when I sort through resumes, and we probably get 100 applications a month, I really hone in and look at two things. One would just be, what did they do in the military? That's going to define 90% of whether or not I'll respond. What did you do? Are you coming from logistics acquisition background? I'm not interested. Are you coming from a background that has required you to do something that has, a physical component to the mental fortitude portion of it? I'm going to start to look. So I think a lot of it is going to depend already on your job. And a lot of people, I will respond and say, you're overqualified. I'm not interested, because I find that they a lot of times want to bring their own ideas and energy to the fight early on. And while that may seem good and something you should be doing, I'd say any job you approach, there needs to be a certain level of humility, understanding that you're starting very back at the bottom again. And so I'd say any job you do that, if there's a way you can express that on your resume, if you're really interested and you did come from a background in the military that's not going to fit this, find a way to express that. Because otherwise they're going to be difficult to work with later on when you give them even a little bit of knowledge. They become hard people. So that's one. And then the other part would be I will look for certain skills, right? Like the actual physical skills that they're going to come with that may be outside of whatever it is that they did in the military. Even something as simple as like, or were they a Boy Scout? Did they do something else interesting in life? I found a guy who was a Marine, and he left and he was a cabinet maker for 4 years, doing fine cabinetry, right? That might not seem like it would transfer over immediately, but I recognized he understands how to measure, cut, glue, screw, and have an eye for detail on certain things, which he can accept a plan and build something out of that. That's what ranching is. Can you build a fence? Can I show you that process? Can you drive an excavator? I can show you that process. And so all of the hands on the ranch, I've looked for what are the skills that they have outside of that military career. Did they develop at least a little bit of something else? And they all had. Like one had been a windmill worker for a period. Another guy was a rodeo clown for a period. Where did they develop the skills? I had another guy who was an academy grad that went to go work for a finance firm. He's our CFO. Those skills transferred immediately. That was very easy, right? That's what else I'm looking for. Extracurriculars, right? Because the military can only prepare you for the mental portion of it. In most jobs, you're not going to come with like the actual skills you need for whatever business you're probably going to go in.
You brought up an interesting point that I want to dig into, where you said that people are almost overqualified in the sense that they come in with their own opinions and they're not good at starting back from the bottom. How do you think that somebody can overcome that? because that's something that I actually have had to work through in my current job, where I've really had to kill the or quiet the captain brain and just say, I'm a junior consultant at this company. I don't really know what's happening here and I need to chill. And
Yeah.
so, how do you think that someone can work through that? Um, I don't know. I don't really
Yeah.
know, like arrogance, maybe, or
I,
overconfidence. I don't know what to really
I
call it.
wouldn't, I wouldn't call it arrogance. And I would say like, it's actually not always the worst thing, right? The way the military is smart in retaining people for little pay to do, a lot of, spend a lot of time is by giving them the extras that are free, or at least making them seem like they have the extras, which is, do you have power? Do you feel like you're in charge and have authority over what you're doing and who you talk to? And, that's how they retain people. Do you get a special cool coat you get to wear? Sometimes those things do mean a lot to people, right? We're all emotional beings. And so how do you get past that to say like, suddenly those perks that I was getting that like they really pumped me up to say I was the best here, that I'm not, I'm starting at the bottom. How do you go through that? I don't have a straight answer for that. I think it's different for everybody in that transition. I went through that too, learning like, man, I don't know anything. Mine was very quick and humbling. I went to go work on as a roughneck and on a beef ranch back to back. And I got ran into the grounds figuratively and literally by animals and people. And so it was a quick transition to say, I need to shift my mindset to learning mode and use the skills that I have to reformulate and try to figure out how are you going to achieve past this, right? Uh, yeah, you got to hit a bit of a rock bottom before you can bounce, right? I don't know. That's what happened to me. I don't have a good answer for how do you not hit a rock bottom. I learned the hard way. I'd say be a wise man and learn from others' mistakes. But maybe keep it in the back of your mind. Maybe focus on it. Maybe, consider, ways. And even if I don't know if you've ever talked to any of like the consultants when you get out, like the Orion guys or all those like recruiting companies.
Mhm.
They all have the same problem is, there are people that come to them and whenever I talk to them about recruiting, they say the same things and have the same frustrations. That particular problem of, particularly like in the officer corps, right? How do you go from this position over here feeling like you're in charge and doing something in the shit and what you really is doing is mattering to these people and nobody really cares about it, right? To going out over here where it's all about profit, right? Are you churning out profit for the business? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately, other than get beat up, go to prison. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interest. I guess then a second way that I'd approach that then is I agree with you based off of a lot of conversations that I've had with people, whether it's finally whatever the realization is, it almost always occurs when someone like bounces off the bottom of whatever they've hit. And if you can't avoid bottoming out to have that learning experience, how do you think someone can build up enough? Because this kind of goes into my other question I was going to ask you, which is how do you make a resilient person to get into like the lifestyle that you live? How do you think someone can build up enough resilience to survive bouncing off the bottom?
Yeah, skills are the savior, right? Like for me, that's what I'm saying when I look at this. Did somebody develop the skills?
Mm.
Because then you don't have to hit the bottom, right? Is there something you can be doing now if you're thinking about transitioning out that you can be working on your skills? And it doesn't matter what your career is. I can tell you for mine, like, can you crimp hydraulic hose and change that in 5 minutes on a machine that's exploded and turn it off? Can you recognize a down fence line? Can you go and work on any sort of schools that are going to give you some agricultural knowledge? How does a rumen work, right? What kind of bloom cycles are you looking at in grass? What kind of things can you study? If you're coming with those skills, it's easier. You don't have to hit the bottom so hard. You can say, I got a little bit of knowledge here. I'm not totally at the bottom. I'm not completely worthless again, right?
Yeah.
When I came to it, I was completely worthless. I hadn't been developing my skills. It was a hard transition. So I'd say that could save you, right? Maybe if you work on that. From going to have to hit the bottom, emotionally, I guess too, right? But I also think it's good. I think you should, right? It's, we do that all the time in this business. It's waves up and down, and that's why I like it. I like it for more than making money, more than feeding people. Really, it's helped solidify real character of how are you gonna weather storms, but be humble enough when times are good to know the next one's coming, and prepare for that. And it keeps you even keeled. It puts me in a good spot in life, and I like that for myself. So it's addicting to come back. But I don't, other than just getting your boat rocked a few times, I don't know. I think
that all of the people that I've talked to, they're much better people now because they've had to go through these different storms in their life. And it's just a very interesting conversation of how do you can you prepare someone for the storm so that they survive, or is the survival the point? And so
Yeah.
can you even prepare for it? And it's I don't know what the answer is. It's just a question I like to ask to people that are
Yeah.
more successful and more resilient than me. So
I would say one more thing, and I don't want to burn it all on this. I would also say that maybe don't make the military your whole identity. I also see that a lot too. You're your own person, and you came into the military as your own person. You'll leave there. The military is not your identity. It's something you did, and same for any career that you choose, right? So I'd say don't get hung up on that. That's my other last piece of advice.
I completely agree with you because I think that if you make the military everything, then you have to leave eventually. And if that's your everything, then what are you when you're done? And so it's it's a tough thing to build a holistic set of values in a job that demands everything from you. And so I guess a question that I would ask you then is, it seems that ranching is also a lifestyle that demands a significant amount of dedication. And so how do you advise your ranch hands to maintain some level of balance there where like you're your own person and this is just something that you do?
I tell them that because they all come in a little nervous at first. And like I said, I try to vet. In this crew that I have now, it's the best crew I've ever had. They're all incredibly humble, fantastic people. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better starting crew at the beginning of this year and summer. So I'll preface it with that. But I generally, for many, many years, have said, like anybody can be a cowboy for a day, right? You can go buy the boots and the hat and watch a TV show, be that for a day. But really what makes you a cowboy is sticking in this, is when you get to the middle of the winter, when it's awful and it's -40 and it's dark and nobody's ever going to look at the fence that you're checking or care about what you've done in the day, and it will never be appreciated or translated. When you can honestly say, I enjoyed doing that for myself and that part for me, that, and continue that repetitiously for your whole life, that makes you a cowboy. And so if you feel like you can't find that balance and that's not hitting inside of you in some way, then you should leave. It's not for you. Go find whatever that's going to be for you. So I don't know. That's what I tell them. And it's only because that's what I found is I'm always checking in, finding, is this what I really want to be doing? And for me, the answer is yes, every day. But I've seen plenty of people come through and try to force it, and it's not a yes.
After having a couple of different conversations with people, I've learned that there's a couple of things that really allow someone to transition well into a new chapter of their life. One of them is you have to have initiative, which I think you are very good at. You also have self-awareness of what you want to be and who you want to be. We just talked about understanding your values and owning what you want to do. And the last one that I'm interested in is community. I think that people who surround themselves with community do a excellent job in weathering those storms of life. And so how do you feel like, what do you do now to ensure that you've built community in your life to support you through those ups and downs?
There's a lot of different facets to the business. So, I have the ranch side, the food side. We're about to launch a resort on the ranch, very high-end hospitality portion of it with restaurants, a private restaurant, things. And then there's just like, the land business side, owning and managing land, which is its own business. But I wouldn't call it mentorship, because saying mentorship in the military is like having some, snotty major tell you from some experience that his grandmother had that, he's here to, set you straight. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that have weathered the storm, have gone through the ups and downs, and have gray hair and have found their way through it and are genuinely interested in helping you through it. Is finding people in each of those realms. I have board members for our different businesses and advisors that sit on the board even. And that has been helpful. That's a regular, normal business thing, right? Most businesses will have some version of that, corporations. And so I have that with our different businesses of people that I'm checking with. And some businesses I have are less formal than others, which are very formal. Like the ranch side is less so formal, but that's about building relationships in terms of being a good neighbor, helping others, making sure that you're always giving back, and with an open hand, with an expectation. And I found that over many years, a decade, that has come back to help me more than anything, in that when I have a moment of need, of not understanding, of whatever the problem may be, everything from legal to physical to, actual storms, you name it, herd has run away, all sorts of disasters, I can call on those people, and they're genuinely interested in caring in what you're doing as I am in them. So it's just being real, building real friendships and relationships with people in whatever it is that you're doing. But maybe separated a little bit, so they're not also, like, you don't want everybody necessarily tied it so closely. So we've also separated some of our boards, and people like to not be so close, right? People that can look with an objective eye.
The way that I think about community are the people that are your advisors or mentors, the people that are kind of going with you on the journey, and then the people that you're mentoring yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I would say, like, the people, your advisors, so your board, then your family, and then I'm assuming you have a significant mentor role with all the people who work on the ranch for you. And so that I would imagine takes up a significant amount of your time. And it seems like you enjoy working with them. You've already said they're
Yeah.
your best crew. So I would imagine they're fun to work with, at least a little bit. Maybe the
Always.
Marines are a little tough, but I'm sure the Air Force
Yeah.
guys make up for it in some intelligence. So
Yeah. The Marines shoot at everything when we have a problem, and the Air Force guys like, trying only to hit the target. So it's fun to, it's all day, but, and sometimes literally too, but it's a good time. I really do enjoy it. And you do become family. So it's another big part of, like, the people who you bring around you and your employees. They live in a bunkhouse, 100 yards, away from my house over here. That family element, and we're so far removed from anything, is extremely important. So that's why I spend a lot of time vetting who we bring in, making sure the personalities match, spending a lot of time to understand their personalities, and pairing people that work well together, and so everybody's happy at the end of the day. But yeah, it is a significant investment into people. And then being able to let it go when they achieve and want to move to something better.
yeah.
If I can't offer them that position immediately, being happy with that and for them, because, that means you genuinely cared about them, which is where you should be, if you really want to be in a true leadership position, you really, really have to care about the individual and not just the number.
Going into leadership and management, if somebody wanted to say they're getting out and they go, man, I've seen a couple of episodes of Yellowstone. The whole ranching thing looks cool. How would somebody do that? In your opinion?
Well, depends what you want to do. I mean, depends where your knowledge level is. If you want to go be Rip on Yellowstone, it's not going to happen.
Crushing
so
dreams already.
Don't try. But I would say work your way up. It's just like anything. You will be starting at the bottom. It's downplayed as kind of a very blue collar, non-sophisticated, low knowledge, barrier to entry job. But truly, there are skills that I'm sure I will never learn in my lifetime that people who've been doing it less time than me have in this, and you're up against them competing. So what can I tell you about that? You really have to know what you want to do. Are you going to rope in a feedlot? Are you going to work as a hand on a big ranch? Do you want to work up to be a manager? You need to understand what you're getting into. Are you going to work beef? Are you going to work open ranges, right? Where are you going to live and work? Are you trying to work as a full-time hand or a day worker, right? Like day hands are pretty common. They run ranch to ranch. And, I could certainly give recommendations in all of that, but you really should know what you're going to want to do and then focus on some skills in there that are going to help you compete against that. I don't care if it's even just like general knowledge, some kind of learning, and then just accept that whatever situation you're going to go into, it's most likely going to be a small family run business. And that has an entirely different element on its own that like you equally need to be searching for that business you're going to be working for in that family, because every ranch is extremely different and they're all operated very different, even though we're mostly doing the same thing. So find what you want there too and focus on it and seek it out.
If you're looking at like these small operations, how would someone know if one is a good one to work for or not?
Do they have high integrity, right? Do they care about you genuinely as a person? Are they throwing you to the wind? I've worked on ranches as a hand where I had a foreman for almost 2 years, and he maybe said a whole paragraph, and he would just tell me, go build a fence on this mountain and to keep the cows in, with very little direction and just no tools, and leave you to your own devices. And that was frustrating. Don't work at a ranch like that. That's a bad ranch. You want high communication, high caring, like a program that's going to train you, that's going to give you more skills as you go, that's not just going to have you doing the same things, but also be, content and humble enough to know, like, man, I'm also going to have to do a lot of shit jobs, literally, to get to a point where I'm doing the part in my head where I envision I'm riding a pony on the prairie, or doing all the stuff that Rip does, right? Because there is, at the high levels, you get to do that stuff, but it's going to take you time. And so don't quit early either there. If it doesn't feel like that's coming right away, this is my 10th or 11th year, and I'm, finally enjoying a lot of those things and items, right? It's going to take time, and I'm the owner, I'm doing a lot of the cleanup work and cleaning up braces or animals on the weekends or whatever. And I don't always get to do all the super cool fun stuff that I want to. So just don't have that expectation either. Don't walk into it with that. It just understands. And you also need, if you're going to get there, it's a lifetime. So don't think you're going to dip in and have a cool life experience to tell some stories about and then walk away. You're not going to get there. You have to say, I'm in it for the long term and the lifetime and the character it's going to build, not just the fantasy in my head, because I see a lot of that too. I see a lot of that coming to the ranch. Yeah, I mean, obviously that show really took off, and so it's changed land pricing and, availability of hands in Montana. It's made me have to look more carefully at who I hire and who I consider, and looking at their character a lot more. But yeah, everybody, 90%, have some level, which is okay. You have to have some want and desire and fantasy to want to do that, but don't live in that, right? Come back to earth, and here we are.
So, why did you decide to move into hospitality? Was it just kind of like a desire to keep expanding the brand, kind of like what you talked about?
I mean, ranching food is hard, right? I guess hospitality is hard too, but you want to spread your eggs out, just like any entrepreneur, because that's what you're doing. You're just building a business. You don't always want to just keep everything in one spot. So we had the opportunity to do that. And so we're working to expand a business and a partnership that way. With you also have to find a way to reasonably pay for land too. You can't only do it through ranching. And while the food business is good and makes good margins, it's still probably not enough until it sells to really delve deep into like a massive land base of private owned ground to pay for leases. So to be reasonable and working with different landowners and those kinds of things, it was just a good natural fit and option. Also, the popularity of the show Yellowstone, people want to come see it in person. They want to see a real working ranch. And what does that really look like? People are so curious after that show, and they get to come and look at the freak show and the oddities up close, and you can sell it to them.
I love that. What as you've kind of gone from learning how to build a ranch to learning how to do a food business to learning how to do hospitality, what do you think has changed in your mentality, or do you feel like you've improved in your ability to spin up brand new things that you've never had to touch before?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, just the part of, you learn more just about building a business. They're all fundamentally same at the end of the day. Is your P&L going to be positive? So can you build something out of that? The rest is, the fun part. That's the part you have to figure out. And that's what I enjoy. I like the fun part of figuring out those new things, and following some early patterns that I learned of just building the functions and legs of the business. And you get to do all the fun grunt work at that part. It's the best part right there at the beginning. Just like a relationship, and then you're married
Yeah.
for a long time. But it's still good, right? And you go through certain periods, and then in the long term, you say, man, this has really matured and become a wonderful thing. You get to look on it in that sense too. But yeah, there's definitely a middle ugly period in there where you got to just get through.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, gotta ask, what's one of the wildest that's happened on your ranch?
Well, we had a lot. How PG or R or X-rated should it be?
You decide, man. This is kids aren't gonna watch this show. So
Okay. Man. Okay. Maybe a couple stories.
hit me with them.
One I can't. Well, they're okay. There's two I can tell. There's one I can't. I'll say the first one was like early on in our business. My wife and I were trying to sort through how are we going to hire people, and we had found a guy to hire. He was our second employee. He came on and came from an affluent family, and we've been through a lot of people. That's always what brings a lot of the drama to the business. And long story short, we took our very first vacation in years. We decided to go to Mexico. I had recently proposed to Brittany. Weren't married yet. She didn't want to bring her ring with her. She left it at home. We hired this new guy. We left. We came back. The ring was gone. Long story short, we find out he had taken it, even though we were assured for like a month he had not been the guy. Then we find out he had all sorts of other problems and issues with them, and had done a very good job with his family of like hiding this past, and turned out to be a pretty, dangerous criminal that we had working for us at one point. And I always say there's no better time than planning to kill somebody with your wife. There's no better way to like come closer with your wife than going through something like that. And we planned to kill this guy because he'd been packing in the ranch, and he wasn't even supposed to have a weapon. And we called the sheriff, but we're so far away. And that part is real in Montana. You're far away. He's like, I won't be there for a week, but you should handle it, and I'll be there to back you up. But you got to obviously have them leave your property. And this is a bit of a police your own property state. And, he told my wife, he's like, do you have a shotgun? Yep. Does she know how to use it? Yes. And he's like, well, there you go. And, call me, but don't leave him alive. That's what he told me. The sheriff said, don't leave him alive. And anyway, we decided we had to confront him to ask him to leave. We brought him in. I had a pistol on him under the table, just like a Western movie. My wife was in the loft, and she was so mad. She was livid at this point, wanted this guy gone. She thought that, I thought she was just going to kill the guy just because we're only going to do it if he pulled a weapon on us, right? But she had a shot on the head, and he did. He came in, he sat down at the table. I confronted him. He obviously knew this was coming. We had found the evidence that he had stolen it, and he turned his chair sideways, and I almost shot him when he did it, because he kind of was preparing he had a piece in his back, and I didn't. And I could see her, and he didn't know she was up there. Long story short, we didn't kill the guy. We never got the ring back, but he left, and we handled that situation later. But, it was a really good come together moment of a husband and wife of feeling like, I guess we're really in this business now,
I guess
because
so. Oh
we,
my
we had,
gosh.
we'd had a few employees like that where sometimes you just take what you can get early on when you can't afford good help. So it was just a fun thing early on. Um, and
What a
another,
marital bond. So were you guys married at that point?
no, we were just engaged, but we had a business together, which we said was more serious than being married,
That is true.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, yeah, that's a good woman right there. If she's
Yeah.
if she's hiding in the rafters with a shotgun.
Yeah. And it's just funny, to look back on it now and think about that. And then we've had so many things like that. We had another guy. I won't get into the details of this one, but I'll just say he wanted to no longer be living on the ranch and decided the best way to do that was to death by bison, which is pretty easy. And got himself into a situation where he was getting attacked by a bison. I killed the bison on top of him, but I thought I had shot through the bison and killed him as well. And luckily he didn't die in that moment. And we got him to the hospital. It was another good bonding moment of marriage. We figured out later this was like a plan of his to try to, he needed an audience basically. This is really getting dark. Is this okay on the show?
Yeah, no,
Talk
this is
about this
great.
stuff? Okay.
This is the coolest. This is the coolest conversation I've had all week.
Anyway, long story short, he lived. We got him to the hospital. It was awful. I thought I was going to die in that because the bison was trying to attack me and him, and he was very terribly, almost mortally wounded.
Yeah.
And we realized we had a bunch of just this big wolf pack on the ranch. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story is we had a daughter. She was very young. She liked Frozen. Okay. I'm just setting the stage with that. And we had come back to the ranch from the hospital. It was the middle of the summer in Montana. He was there. We were kind of digesting what had happened, this whole event. And we needed to get rid of the body of the bison that I had killed, because we had a wolf pack that had been coming in and eating some bison. And I was like, man, having a big dead bloated bison on the ranch is not, this is just going to cause more problems. So, we ended up trying to like get it to a spot where we could dig it a grave, but like Montana clay gets like hard as a rock, like concrete out here in the summer in the heat. And we're just trying to like dig this shallow grave to roll the buffalo into, to like cover it with dirt to do something. And long story short, we couldn't do it. We just threw some dirt on it. We were just shoveling like clay onto the top of it. And right in the middle of it, we were just feeling like, what is happening with this business? How are we going to make it through? Like kind of panicking. This guy is, all this shooting happened and we got, a dead animal here. And we're feeling like, just all the stress of like the heat of the summer on us trying to cover this buffalo. And my daughter, who is like playing in the grass at that point with us, climbs up onto the dead buffalo. She's just a little girl, 3-4 years old. And she's singing like, let it go from the Frozen show. And we just started laughing. And it was a good moment. Those are the kind of moments you have in the middle of nowhere doing this kind of stuff. And, we just laugh about that later.
Oh my gosh. If I ever was going to kill myself, I don't think I'd want to get crushed to death by a bison. Like that's not even in my top 10 ways to go. If I'm going to be honest with you, like that sounds horrible.
It was awful. It was awful. And you know what? He decided halfway through that on the same thing you just said. So
he was making a bad decision. I mean, I would imagine so. Like what do you like? I mean, obviously, I hope.
Oh
if
yeah.
anyone out there is listening and they go, "Well, that seems like a great idea." You're crazy and don't do it. So that's
yeah.
Oh my gosh! Like I feel like if you've watched any compilation of tourists going after bison in Yellowstone, you would know that's a bad idea.
Oh yeah. This was the worst of it. Let me tell you, it was you couldn't show that on Live Leak. That's for sure.
I believe that. Have you I don't know, has the bison, how do you even manage bison that are coming at you like that? I guess is like, obviously you don't want to shoot them all the time because that's your money. But
Exactly. Yeah. No, that was a one-off of me having to kill it like that. The whole point is you don't put yourself in that situation to begin with. And he had enough knowledge to do that. We found that out later. So that's unusual. That's not normal. That was him choosing that. So that's step one. But obviously things still happen. I've been gored and trampled and all sorts of things and, all sorts of injuries, still recovering from being gored a couple of years ago. The best, I don't know. You learn, right? You just try to be as careful as you possibly can. It's having a high safety mindset, always watching out for the littlest things that can get you and keeping that at top of mind and staying sharp, sharpening the hands around. They're looking out for you as well. So, and that's another great part about having military guys. I had an incident where I got trampled and, had some bison turn around, try to crush me, and had another Marine who doesn't work at the ranch anymore. I mean, totally throw himself in the line and pull me out of there, risking his own life at that point. And so I don't think that, if you had Billy Joe from UCLA, who's
not going to probably do that for you.
No, he's just going to stand there with a mouth wide open rather than acting and being trained to act in a very short period of time. What am I going to do best in this situation? And so that's another great reason to have military people in this profession doing this job, because it's very dangerous. And, you learn how to manage risk and how to look out for each other and how to care for people and then have the correct reactions when it counts in short periods of time. I think the military is excellent in certain career fields about teaching people how to do that. And so
that's awesome. And I mean, hey, look, see, we're family friendly again. We pivoted all the way back to advice for transitioning military members. Oh man. Any more wild stories that you want to leave our guests with before we go?
Man, none that I can legally tell. I'll just say that. Yeah. We've got a
I
lot.
love
If you come here, I'll tell you guys in person, but that's about it. Yep.
It's funny because now people are like, so Yellowstone is true.
Yeah, I will say that I can't watch that show. I did watch the first season, but it was incredibly stressful to watch that because, and I can't speak for the rest of it. I don't, we turned it off, but, what I saw was a guy fighting every aspect to keep ground together. And that part is real. I think the writers understood that stress and the constant grinding that can wear you down if you let it, or are you going to find a way through it? And, obviously it doesn't end in a shootout with the BIA or the DOL every time, right? It's not that, but sometimes certain elements of that do happen, of like having to make difficult decisions in really weird spots, and so that's the only parallel I can draw between that show, which I think most people that are trying to keep a lot of ground running together have seen here in Montana. And but yeah, the rest of it's all bullshit, Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Sucks. Don't watch it.
Yeah.
Kevin Costner, if you're listening,
Yeah.
do something else.
No, Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. Well, Jon, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to tell everybody about a career that's a lot of people don't know about. And I think that it's just a really amazing way of life, and more people should know about it. Before we go, final question I ask all the guests. Do you have any final pieces of advice that you would want to leave the listeners?
I have nothing. I don't know. I don't have any other super sage things to say.
Great. You've been sageful for an hour and 27 minutes, so I don't expect you to keep pulling all these really cool life lessons out of your bag. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time, for making time in your very busy schedule to give people your story and to inform everyone on these awesome things that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, and hope to see you again at the ranch sometime.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it. And thank you so much for everyone out there who's listening. If you like this content, please subscribe, follow, whatever platform. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Post Military Podcast.